Welcome to this Roundup. A freedom to explore human biology, human brain, human life, and the ecosystem is a wonderful thing. Now, along with democratization of information, tools, and technology over the years, biohacking to neurohacking and life hacking, the emerging decentralized do-it-yourself self-biology and brain simulation movement brings nations a great potential for solving the complex problems facing humanity. This is especially promising in a time when we are no longer confined to what nature must offer, as the advances in science and technology has given us the capability to even create living things. While what nature has given is still the foundation of our natural human biological ecosystem, we the humans are now able to build on this foundation and create a man-made synthetic bio-ecosystem of our own desire and definition. The time is almost here where the ability to create or manipulate human life and its potential seems to be restricted only by the imagination, as we will now be able to not only manipulate existing human body cells, tissues, and systems, but also build any cell, organism, or biological species up from scratch. So when the emerging biohacking, neurohacking, or life hacking practice involves not only manipulating human systems, but also genes and brain, with or without sufficient understanding of its impact, the promise and perils of this emerging do-it-yourself movement needs to be properly understood and evaluated. To discuss the promise and perils of biohacking, neurohacking, and life hacking, I'm delighted to welcome Teemu Arina to this roundup. Teemu is the Chief Biohacker and Chairman of the Board at Biohacker Center based in Finland. He is also the co-author of the best-selling Biohacker's Handbook for Optimizing Sleep, Exercise, Nutrition, Mind, and Work with technological and biological tools, and co-author of the Biohacker Stress Manual for Optimizing the Human Nervous System. He is also the recipient of the Leonardo Award under the title of Humanity in Digitization. Welcome, Teemu. We are so very honored to have you on this roundup.
Thank you very much. I'm honored as well. Yes.
Wonderful. Wonderful, Teemu. So let's begin by talking about the democratization of biology, the do-it-yourself moment first. We have begun to see emerging evidence and increasing interest from the social and technological sciences in the concept of decentralized systems, the decentralized mindset, and collective intelligence to understand complex human systems. So as we take a step forward towards decentralization of biology, where is this trend taking us? Where are we going?
So what is happening right now is that tools and technologies, including also scientific experiments and methods that used to be only in the hands of a selected few, are now available to the general public. So if I give you an example of gene sequencing, 10 years ago, sequencing your genes would have cost $10 million. Now you can get it for $1,000. There's companies like 23andMe that can do it for you a couple of $100. So it's readily available for a lot of people to gain deeper insight into their bodies. Now, if you're talking about like modifying the human body, obviously, you can do that with so many different methods, from nutrition to supplements to and so on. But there is also this gene manipulation technology called CRISPR-Cas9 that enables you to do very basic. I have to say, you can modify a human embryo with this technology. But if you want to do some very, very simple experiments with bacteria, for example, you can get a kit for $159. So we're also talking about accuracy of many of these things. That's starting from measuring things in the human body to different interventions. They're becoming much, much more accurate. So CRISPR-Cas9 is much, much more accurate than gene manipulation techniques were years ago. So a lot of people have misconceptions when it comes to, working on artificial life forms or modifying existing code, it's actually extremely error prone. You very easily don't get the result you're looking for. So it sounds, on theory, it sounds like amazing, like the huge threat, but most of that stuff will not work because the accuracy of this technology is not where it is. And also, human and any kind of biological organism is so complex that making those interventions, we might want to try to turn off a gene that increases the risk for a inherited disease, but you might be turning on another condition. So it's a complex system and you can't easily understand it. So what we are now using this technology for pretty much in the world is for modifying fungus and bacteria to do what we want to produce certain compounds or to clean the soil from toxic waste and so on. So some simple organisms. Now, when it comes to quantified self technologies, like I have this ring here, this extremely accurate sensors, and this ring can track my sleep quality, the stages of my sleep, my body temperature, the amount I'm active during the day, how outside sedentary. It can track my nervous system, heart rate, recovery, and it can combine all the data with machine learning algorithms to better understand how I differ from where I'm usually at. So if I'm well rested and recovered, or if I'm kind of running myself or burning the candle from both ends. And well, with this technology, like it used to be, sleep laboratory studies cost like several $1,000s a night. Now you can get a device like this for like $300, and you can do that for 5 years every night. So the cost of doing things comes down. It was Buckminster Fuller, an American architect, who said that when he studied complex systems and the world today and looked at scientific advancements and exponential technologies, he noticed that what we are heading towards is dematerialization. So things that used to be super expensive material are becoming inexpensive and immaterial. So we are able to work on so many things nowadays purely in digital. So if you design an airplane or building, or you try to understand metabolic pathways in a biological organism, you can create a simulation, and you can do that so much more cheaply. And there's more accurate sensors, there's more accurate technologies, cheaper, cost efficient. So the Moore's law that enables us in terms of computing to double our capacity every 18 months, or performance number of transistors on a chip, is also kind of affecting, not just affecting, but you can see the same kind of process happening on other systems as well. And Buckminster Fuller called this not just dematerialization, but ephemeralization. That was his word for it. And this takes us to a very exponential trajectory that next 10 years, many of the things that we just saw in movies or we see only in the labs today will be commonplace. That being systems through which you can telepathically control computers, systems that are extending or augmenting or existing senses, vision system, hearing, all of that. I mean, we already see kind of example, even consumer technologies of this, but it will come faster than we think and will disrupt existing industries, will change life forever.
Yes, that's very true. No, that's a good overview and summary that you gave about all these different developments that are happening, in this world. Now, you talked about CRISPR technology, and you rightfully said that there is not that we still don't know. You try to turn on a gene and some turn off a gene, and something else will turn on, and we don't know the accuracy, we don't know the impact, we don't know what kind of reactions would happen or risk would emerge because of trying to manipulate the genes. So there are a lot of concerns. We can try creating organisms from scratch to do simple tasks that we are trying to have them achieve. But the synthetic biology, the because of this CRISPR technology, it brings us lots of risk and rewards, but at the same time it also gives us a lot of potential to manipulate or create things and manage a lot of risks that we humans face currently. And if we can talk about the biohacking a little bit further in the discussion, but before we go there, what I would like to talk about the neurohacking, because it seems that it is being, very widely used. There are a lot of machines that are available for neurohacking. There are a lot of tools available. So, what is the status of brain enhancement using these neurohacking tools at the moment?
Right. Do you drink coffee?
Yes, I do.
Yes. So, I mean, most people are doing neurohacking as we speak.
Yes.
And they are enhancing their cognitive capabilities, alertness, and focus with thousands of years old beverages. And they don't think much about it. But, it's one of the most powerful tools that we have today. So food, nutrition, different ways to enhance cognitive capabilities, they exist already today. And, you have things like pharmaceutical or nutraceutical interventions, things like nootropics that enable you to enhance your cognitive capabilities. So there's two kind of main approaches to it. One of them is to kind of oil the system, support the neurotransmitters, the pathways that generate brain activity. That's more subtle kind of support. It might enable you to have better energy levels for longer. It might be about supporting your basic brain chemistry. You might not necessarily notice anything subjectively changing, but if we did cognitive tests over time, you might notice an improvement. Now, you have also things that have very noticeable effects, and coffee obviously has a very noticeable effect. Matcha tea has a very noticeable effect. But then there's pharmaceutical drugs that are being used also on the market. Things like modafinil, which is prescribed for shift workers and for narcolepsy, is being used as a wakefulness agent, but also as something that enhances cognitive capabilities. What I think about this is like, there was a study that listed, for example, this particular pharmaceutical as most likely the most effective and safest nootropic on the market. To me, that's a bit misguided, because when it comes to a lot of drugs that we use, even things like painkillers, we're still discovering side effects and new aspects of them. Like painkillers were shown to recently, paracetamol, to dampen emotional control. I mean, many things like Viagra originally was designed for something else, but what it's used today. So the human system is extremely complicated machinery, and working with the brain that we don't really understand very well today is like tinkering with a black box, and you have an input, but you don't see much what's going on inside, and then you have an output, you try to measure it. It's like seeking for a needle in the haystack in the dark. And so to me, what I'm kind of what I advocate, instead of like going for these things that very obvious effects, is to go for things that are more subtle and has been used for thousands of years to support our cognitive capabilities. Probably safer and more balanced interventions for sure. And I mean, in terms of cognitive enhancement, you can also have electroceuticals. You can activate the same areas of the brain that might be activated when you use something like NSAIDs or antidepressants or things like coffee. You could, through electricity, activate those parts of the brain. So in the end, like taking any kind of pharmaceutical or nutraceutical is you're trying to increase activity in a certain part of the brain, increase blood flow, reduce some areas, and some things that work for some other person might not work for another person. That's the problem with a lot of drugs that try to alter the brain. We don't yet know, like, even on a theoretical level, why antidepressants work in some case and when it doesn't in some other case. So statistically, there is no 100% silver bullet for cognitive enhancement right now, but you can do a little bit. Most of the enhancement you see in people who have cognitive decline or they have a malfunctioning brain. You can use these things to restore function, and obviously relatively they will perform better. So many of these drugs are actually neuroprotective by nature. So they tend to clinically reduce risk for getting Alzheimer's disease. They might statistically reduce risk for cognitive decline. They might improve blood sugar control. They might improve recovery from a stroke. So most of the benefit you get from cognitive enhancers is really to sick people. If you're a healthy person, the relative improvement is not very drastic. But then again, there's so many different ways to do this. I mean, if you want to enhance your cognition, the most studied, most effective way to do that is exercise. If you exercise your large muscles, you grow your cognitive capabilities. Also, the parts of the brain that are dealing with certain functions are being enhanced. Things like meditation also enhance. Things like emotional control and cognitive capabilities. It's the only way, really, in a wakeful state where you can train your focus properly, and it will also increase the size of connectivity in certain parts of the brain that are related to things like emotional control or just sensory experience. So you can change the brain in so many different ways. You can enhance so many different ways. It's such a complex system right now, and we can't directly study it, living human person ethically. So that kind of sets us back a little bit with it.
Yes, no, absolutely. I hear there are also some binaural beats that people are using, in large numbers to kind of manipulate the brain waves for optimal human function. So what is your understanding of these different waves, that brain waves that people are trying to manipulate, or rather, balance, like delta, theta, alpha, and beta or gamma waves, using these binaural beats? Is it effective?
So coming out of EEG studies where you're studying the electric activity of the brain, we've noticed that there's these different frequencies of brain waves that are related to different states of consciousness. It's a huge generalization, but basically that's what's going on. So things like meditative states, more creative states might be accessible if you have higher theta brain activity. Now, we spend most of our time in high alpha, in a very wakeful state, very fast brain frequencies. Things like coffee enhance that. But then again, when you're looking at it from the perspective of how you can manipulate those brain waves, I mentioned meditation is one. Now, you mentioned binaural beats. So that's something where you are using a certain frequency of sound in both ears, and there is a certain difference in hertz, which is reflective to the brainwave frequency that you want to achieve. So the theory goes that your brain will synchronize to that sound. So if the difference is 10 hertz, which is closer to theta brainwaves, you will be able to increase theta brainwaves by listening to a very meditative track that implements this technology. Personally, I'm using it because I know this subjectively great benefits of doing something like that to get ready for any kind of presentation or meeting or whatever, to be more relaxed when making decisions. I'm using it in city environments that are busy and full of stressful signals and people, and I'm just like zoning myself out in binaural beats with noise cancelling headphones. I find it useful. Now, binaural beats, it works if the background white noise and whatever comes with it is something that your brain doesn't recognize. It's kind of novel. So it's not music or ambient or some stuff that is familiar to you, but it's constantly changing. In nature, things like the trees doing their sounds, or the water, the river flowing, all these kind of sounds, they don't have a clear structure. So our brains kind of like to bath in that and relax. In nature, the things that consistently stick out, or patterns that you can easily recognize as language or some kind of communication or music, you very easily, they take your attention. Now, if you are able to kind of reset your brain by having things that it can't clearly recognize or doesn't kind of notice any difference there. Silence, by the way, is not very relaxing for organisms. Complete silence is stressful also slightly, because in nature, when it's silent, it's usually the storm is coming. So having some kind of little background noise is already kind of white noise. It's relaxing. Putting some binaural beats on the top really helps then to gain a more relaxed meditative state. And the studies are a bit controversial when it comes to the effectiveness, really, on the efficacy of binaural beats. But like I said, I mean, even though the studies don't show yet exactly how they work or if there is even an effect, personally, I get a lot of benefit from it just for relaxation, better than classical music.
Yes, no, I mean, relaxation, I have tried some of them too, but if you do Google search, you will see all kinds of benefits. People claim that binaural beats for weight loss, binaural beats for, all kinds of different, disease remedies. So that's what, I would like to see if there is an actual truth to any of that. I mean, for relaxation is absolutely, amazing. I have tried.
Yeah, people can claim all kinds of things on the internet, and I haven't seen any studies that show that binaural beats have any clear studied effect that can be fully replicated. The studies have been very small so far, but definitely the effects of music for relaxation, stress management, increasing heart rate variability has been noticed in studies, well-designed studies. Usually also music that is familiar to you has been considered in studies to be beneficial for relaxation, increasing heart rate variability. So, yeah, there is support for these things, but when it comes to things like weight loss or curing cancer, no.
Yes, I understand that. I mean, people would like to hope, and people may, think that while doing something they actually got benefit. We'll have to evaluate much more, in depth whether those benefits actually occurs. And again, these are very subjective things too. I mean, what works for one person may not work for another person, like you said in the beginning. So these are very individualized, customized approaches and treatments that may work or may not work for everyone. So but it's interesting to see that there is a very intense effort going on in creating all different kinds of binaural beats. And on some of the YouTube channels I saw, there were like millions, like 10, 15, 20 million views on all this, and people are giving very good recommendations about this. So there could be truth. Who knows about that? I mean, unless we try and we see the difference ourselves, we don't know if actually if that is very claim, or whether those are going to work for
But definitely you can see some changes in brain imaging studies. So there is some effect. To be able to understand what the effect is and how that might differ from one individual to the other, might need more research. When it comes to stuff from YouTube, I would recommend to go for like real professional. If you want to really try like binaural beats, I would try something like Brain.fm, and they actually use actual research behind that to generate those soundscapes, because you can create music or soundscapes and claim that it's binaural beats. But things like Brain FM is constantly changing what you're hearing. So you won't be able to recognize the same pattern as you listen to it. There's all kinds of generators that are able to do this as well. But definitely, I mean, what these are working with is your internal feedback loops and kind of triggering things there, potentially activating the default mode network. The default mode network in the brain is key to creativity, and it's something that the brain kind of likes to be in. And Binaural Beats activates the default mode network. It's great because right now what we have in today's society is a constant bombardment of signals that catch our attention and activates our sympathetic nervous system, becomes stressed easily. We're overloaded by signals. If these kind of tools make it faster for people to kind of let go of active participation in the sensory overload, I mean, it's good for us. So I'm not surprised why these tracks might be so popular. People probably need something like that in today's world.
Absolutely. I hear you.
Because there is an absence of nature in them. If you live in nature, you don't need binaural beats.
Yes, very true. But not everyone lives in nature. You and I both know that. So yes, they do have benefits. I have listened to some of those beats myself, and they are very calming, very relaxing. I haven't experienced all different beats that are out there, but I have listened to some in recent weeks, and I do see some benefits in that. But having said that, I also came across some information about the people use electric current to activate all their neural pathways and nerve cells. Is that something? Is that a trend you see picking up?
Yeah, you're probably referring to transcranial.
Yes.
TDCS, transcranial direct current stimulation. And when it comes to TDCS, yes, that is definitely has use. So they have clinically approved certain TDCS implementations for treating depression. It's great in a world where depression, which is now being treated with pharmaceuticals with not very high efficacy always, and it has shown great potential, great application in that. And TDCS has also been studied for addiction. It has been studied for food cravings, has been studied for a bunch of different problems like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. Those more with mixed results. And there is a Cochrane review that found evidence that TDCS can be useful for certain conditions like Parkinson's disease to be able to deal with everyday life. So these are, I mean, most of the research and studies go into treating disease and conditions. When we're talking about healthy people, there's less research usually on these things. Like I mentioned about nootropics, most of them are studied on sick people who have cognitive decline, and now there might be effects that seem to be great, but it might be that in a completely healthy person there might be no effect, or it might be problematic over time to do something like that, activating too much acetylcholine through an acetylcholine inhibitor. So the TDCS, I don't think it's in US. It has not been approved by FDA, but it has been approved in Europe. So here in Europe, where I live, TDCS has been approved for treatment of major depressive disorder. So there might be differences here, but the interesting thing about TDCS is the cost. So in the end, it's a super simple device. Constructing one you can do with a battery, basically, almost, and a few wires. So you can, and some modulators. I wouldn't recommend anyone to take a battery and stick that to your brain. Don't do it. You will die. But there's devices out there that are not too expensive. So if you want to experiment with this, the problem with TDCS is that you can't have a device like that constantly on. So you usually have like some kind of excitatory area, what it excites in the brain, and then you have the opposite kind of I think it's the anode and the cathode. The anode, cathode. I don't remember which one. Anyway, so the other one goes into the part where the signal comes out or the electricity comes out, and that's where there is a reduction of activity. And the depression, there are specific parts in your forehead that you shut down simultaneously as you activate certain parts, and that creates the antidepressive or antidepressant effect. And what I find great is that often these things come with little side effects. It's supposedly safe based on research, but I mean, research is still out there. We are bioelectrical beings, so we don't have full understanding of these kind of things. What happens when you modulate with electricity your brain? There's people who are worried about electromagnetic fields, like now we are like putting electricity directly to your body. But these things have been used for treatment for years, and what I'm talking about when you're tapping your brain with electricity, it's not like the kind of like electric shocks that you give to someone who is schizophrenic or just nothing, responds to nothing else, and then you give them, or massively depressed and you give them massive electric shocks. No, that's not the thing. So you are basically that might be useful for resetting things, but it's a horrible experience. With TDCS, you don't feel anything, like almost maybe a little tingling sensation. It's very hard to say if you're suddenly smarter or more capable for some activities, but you can measure some of those things in cognitive tests. You can't necessarily say personally if your mood has improved greatly, but it's kind of that also shows how hard it is for human beings to really observe transience in their consciousness, especially if it's very gradual. So if there's very, very, very gradual change, you don't probably notice anything going on. But if you measure it over time, you might see an effect. But I find TDCS a promising area. There's also magnetic stimulation. So that's the application of very strong magnets on the brain. Those things you can't have at home. They are expensive and they're used for more serious conditions. But TDCS has shown some potential. But the effect is not permanent. So if you use it, you probably use it only for 20 minutes at a time. If you use it for too long, there's a reverse effect. So you're not getting the results you're looking for anymore. And if you want to have more permanent effects, neurofeedback is one way to go. Meditation practice, one way to go. So there's ways to kind of have long-lasting changes on the brain, but not necessarily from a TDCS device.
Sure, but then I see that there are a lot of different tools available, like wearing some headbands. I think it's available, on Amazon also, probably few $100 that a lot of sports people also try out. So it seems like this trend is picking up to try to give minor, electric shock or electric to pass the electric current to your brain to get enhanced performance. But again, these things you cannot, amateurs cannot do at home, and you have to do under supervised, guidance unless you get expertise in that. But having said that, as we see the biohacking movement or neurohacking or life hacking, these emerging biohackers, neurohackers, or life hackers, who are these people? Is it like anyone who wants to do something different, or are these groups or individuals? How is it working across nations?
So when it comes to biohacking, there's as many definitions as there are biohackers. So if I just outline a little bit on these different definitions. So there's people who call themselves grinders. They are the most extreme ones. They implant technologies on their bodies, and they're interested in transhumanistic ideas. Obviously, you have the transhumanists who are talking about how to transcend what it means to be human. In that group, there is a lot of discussion on life extension and longevity. Also Also cryopreservation, just putting your body into ice and restoring it to life once medical technology advances enough. Now, those guys are pretty extreme. Then on the other spectrum, you have people interested in nutrition and just like, optimizing their bodies and minds with optimal nutrition or exercise. That's a more softer approach. You can do meditation, you can eat healthy food, you can go for a run. And that's also biohacking. So biohacking to me is the systemic conscious participation in optimizing your biological system. You can be guided by, insights from medical literature or using activity trackers or even using technical tools. But in the end, you don't need technology for it. Biohacking doesn't require you to have any kind of technology because your body is already technology. You are already a leverage for a lot of things. Now, you can use food as technology. You can use air as technology. You can use light as technology to influence your biology. Now, it's the conscious application of these that makes biohacking. Now, some people also think that biohacking is a measurable way to improve health expectations. So that's also an interesting way to think about it. Like you can do lab tests, you can look at your blood biomarkers, you can design a protocol to improve something, then you retest and you might see a change happening. So biohacking is the application of hacker ethic to what it means to be human. Hacker ethic meaning any hacker. You can be a hacker in any field. You can be a hacker in astronomy. You can be a hacker in literature. You can be a hacker in computer systems. You can be a hacker in biological systems. Now, hacking doesn't mean that you break into anything. That's a misconception, historical misconception, created by media sometime in 50s, 60s when first computer hackers emerged, who were cracking into systems. So those were called crackers. Now hackers are any enthusiastic individuals who are interested in how systems work. They're systems thinkers. Talking about hacking as a negative term is completely misunderstanding the original meaning and definition of the term. Now, we obviously use the term in the Biohacker's handbook that I've written and Biohacker's stress manual that is coming out and other things. It's a controversial word that draws attention, but what we really do, we redefine things that have existed for thousands of years in a new package. So to me, like using technology can be as big of a mirror to yourself as any kind of like spiritual practice. So you can use data to become more aware of yourself, and you can become more aware of this very present moment if you want. You can influence your state of consciousness, and you can observe what's the changes subjectively, or you can do it more objectively with instruments. So with this thing here, this is a consumer EEG reader. I might be able to kind of figure out my ability to concentrate, and I might be able to then try, let's say, some of those nootropics or a cup of coffee and see, if it has any measurable effect. Now, subjectively, as humans, we're not very good at sometimes observing transient change. We're not even good at observing, like, how is my year today different from last year? We don't remember things exactly how they happened. We might remember a little bit what happened today, maybe a little bit more about yesterday still, but not really like what happened a week ago at this very same time. But with technology, you can gain insight into that kind of process. And you can, over time, you can measure your blood values, you can see the changes in your body through different instruments. That you can try to feel, obviously. Maybe you feel, some sensation, some tingling somewhere. Maybe your belly is getting bigger, you think. But you don't really know until you go for a scale or you use some kind of measurement device to be exactly sure what's going on. And that's the thing, is that the data can enable you to have a feedback loop through which you learn faster, through which you gain deeper insight more quickly into your current state. And the faster the feedback loops, the faster the learning, the faster you are able to be conscious about yourself. Because I think life is a process of awakening, and you can use so many different tools and technologies. You can sit in a lotus position and wait for that to happen, or you can use technology as a feedback loop. You could use psychoanalysis for it. You can use so many different ways to become more aware of your subconscious mind and what it's doing, what the operating system behind the matrix is doing.
Yes, very true, very true. Now, you made an interesting point that is the systems approach that these biohackers are taking, because they're looking at the overall system, not just focused on that if you have a problem, if you're getting headache, let's just focus on a headache and not worry about where the headache is originating or why is it originating, things like that. So that systems approach is very important. You also made another point about the technology. So it seems that there is also emerging trend of implanting technology among this biohacking movement. So which technology implants are getting popular from your observation?
Well, any medical procedure that involves fixing like a broken hip with a hip replacement is also already biohacking that's restoring your function. Using eyeglasses to extend your vision or enable you to block certain wavelengths of light is kind of a cyborg technology already. If you use contact lenses, it's not too far from replacing your eye with technology. Now, there is implants that some people need to survive or to have a quality of life. So maybe there is a device that modulates at will your central nervous system so that pain signals don't go to the brain, or something that stops the seizure where it begins. Now, these kind of implants increase our quality of life by restoring the existing functionality. Now, we can also use implants to extend our capabilities, to take it beyond what it means to be human. So you can have artificial legs that help you to run faster and further than anyone else who has real legs. You might have a chip in your hand that you can use as keys or as a credit card, or something that opens up doors or pays for the ticket in a subway. So you might have your Bitcoin wallet embedded into your hand, but those are quite passive implementations still. They're not super active, and then when you get into more active implementations, not just reading a chip through your hand with your phone, which has most of the functionality on the phone and on the cloud, but when you have some functionality on the device itself, maybe it's a sensor, the question becomes, how do you charge that thing? And there is no safe battery technology really that you can just put into your body. I mean, you might have something that kind of fixes your heart arrhythmias. Might have the battery outside of your body. The device is embedded into your chest. Now, there's a lot of people who use these kind of things. And I see that medical technology will improve, that these kind of implants become safe for human bodies, and maybe we'll be able to charge them and run a battery on them on a safe way without taking it out occasionally. Maybe you could use your skin as a solar panel, or maybe you could harvest the energy that's already in our body. But we are not even close to yet like having those kind of implementations on consumer level. So
that would be interesting to have that, using the skin as accessing the solar energy through our skin membrane.
But the way how I see is that you could have like these technologies to send new information to your nervous system, which then enables you to have an external sense. So there is a company called NordSense that creates this implant that you put on your chest, and it basically vibrates every time you face north. And in the beginning, you notice the vibration, but over time, your brain cancels out that signal. It doesn't anymore recognize the vibration, but it senses direction. Now the brain is plastic and it can change in response to the environment and sensory input. You might have a magnet in your finger, and this magnet might be modulated with a magnetic field around your hand, and that might tell you a direction, a distance to a certain location, so you don't need to pull out your Google Maps. There's a company that created like a wristband for your ankle that tells through vibration around your leg the direction. Same case here. You don't have to embed it necessarily. It can be on your skin, and over time you start to read that as direction. Now, if you have lost your eye vision, you might learn to use your sense of touch as vision. So if you have some kind of device that is converting what you see into signals that you can sense with your fingers, then that can enable you to see with touch. So the brain is plastic. It can change the way how it works. The areas of the brain that are dedicated for certain functions are not fully set on stone. You can modify those over time. But right now, like implants, they are pretty much medical, not ready yet for mass market. It comes with a lot of ethical questions and implications, like, okay, is it okay to put these things into human bodies? But I mean, we are putting things like vaccines in there. We are putting things like, I don't know, you break your leg, we put some iron in that to support it. So why not? That's the question. But there's some religious connotations that highlight the fact that the body is kind of given to you from higher realms, and you shouldn't touch it. Maybe that's a valid point. Maybe we don't know what we are working on with here, but at the same time, like we wouldn't be able to know unless we experiment.
Very true. Very true. We have to experiment and we have to evaluate. Now, it seems there are also, you told about magnets, that some people are using magnets in their fingers, and I read about that too. But it also seems some biohackers are also injecting things that they have created using the CRISPR technology. I mean, they create things and they put it in the bloodstream or they put it in the muscles to modify themselves. How widely used is this practice?
Yeah, the cases I know, they either are dead or insane. So it's kind of like all these crazy lab rats doing crazy experiments on themselves. But at the same time, we have to understand a lot of discoveries in medicine have actually come from self-experimentation, have not come from like large-scale studies always, like the discovery of penicillin or the discovery of LSD. These things were accidents. Serendipity in science, the discovery of Post-it notes, the glue was supposed to be the strongest glue ever, but it required a little bit of serendipity to realize that it was the worst glue ever, but it can be used for something else. So experimentation is important, and sometimes things just come out by accident. You're working on something else and discover something else, and we wouldn't be able to know if we just waited for some placebo-controlled trials for putting a chip on your hand for 20 years. Like, there's going to be people who are going to do these things on themselves, and if someone is creating some kind of cure for, I remember this guy who injected himself with stuff that was supposed to cure him from human papillomavirus. He's no longer with us. Sometimes you need these brave individuals who are so certain about their own experiments that it might work. It was Linus Pauling, Nobel Prize winner, who advocated using large quantities of vitamin C. He was so certain about this, and he was one of the pioneers of vitamins and discovery of them, their function. And now we know that it's a bit controversial, actually, if you can heal anything with large amounts of antioxidants. Maybe they can actually increase the risk of cancer. So we need pioneers. We need some crazy individuals who are just going to do it themselves if they can't find lab animals for it.
I hear you on that people are willing to experiment, and people are willing to even sometimes sacrifice their own lives, like you said, there are some biohackers that are no more, as they were trying to do different things. So this open sourcing of genetic engineering, I think that is perhaps the one that has the most serious implications, as the biohackers or hackers or life hackers, as they try to manipulate their system, human system, uh, to either cure some disease or to get a better performance in what they were hoping for. So while do you see that there is enough accountability among these kind of biohackers who are trying to go to extreme levels, even willing to sacrifice their own lives? Do you see that there's is some sort of accountability that we can bring in the nature of the experiments they are trying to do? Because some of them will have impact that would be limited or to just their human body, but if they are trying to create some gene, or if they are trying to create something and inject themselves with that, and if that has interconnected interdependencies, it would bring us cascading impact that will be probably difficult to manage. So it is not about whether we should self-experiment or not, but about what kind of experiments we should do on ourselves that limits the risk to only us, and not spread it to the larger community. So the question is
Sure.
about accountability. So how do we bring accountability, and do you see that accountability amongst all the biohackers across nations?
Well, it's a good question. What do we mean by accountability here? Like, if you're accountable to yourself, or who decides what is accountable, and or what is ethically right, and or what is okay, and what has larger impact and what doesn't. I mean, if you hurt yourself, your family will suffer. Is that like that you should be accountable to your family members about your future? Now, there's a lot of people who drink alcohol and they do all kinds of crazy self-experiments on themselves with drugs, and they are completely irresponsible. And they're working with known things that destroy them. Now, if you have someone who is working with some unknown substances or unknown technologies, and they hurt themselves, I mean, it's their choice eventually. So I'm a big believer in choice, that you can choose what you do, what you want, but simultaneously to be wise enough and aware enough that you're not affecting a lot of people around you. Now, if we are working on a bacteria in the lab and it kind of escapes and it destroys humanity, that's not good, right? So, but you have to understand that there's going to be people who experiment with these things and they make mistakes, and we learn from mistakes. And then there's people who deliberately try to make a negative impact. And it's more likely that it's not going to be the one who is doing these things from pure joy and interest. It's going to be the biggest threat is coming from someone who deliberately used this technology to create something out of nightmares. So, because making something that really spreads, or something that has really cascading effects, you have to put a lot of resource and efforts into it. So if you take something like food and agriculture, pesticides, all that, like gene manipulation of seeds, that whole thing, it's a huge industry. There's a lot of money being poured into it, and it's endangering the health of not just single individuals, but the whole global population. We are creating bacteria-resistant, antibiotic-resistant bacteria. We are creating superbugs with this kind of practice. It's driven by profit and greed and large corporations and their interest. Now, yeah, I mean, as individuals, definitely we have to understand our impact with the actions that we do. But I don't think there is one single authority who can decide and understand the real implications of something. Because like I said, many discoveries in science that we cherish and we celebrate today have come from individuals who decide to self-experiment, to try things on themselves. And if we limit that too much, we are limiting innovation. Now you can bring more wisdom to it, through different systems and bureaucracy, certainly. But
No,
it doesn't always work.
it doesn't have to be bureaucracy. We don't, it's not always about bureaucracy to bring accountability in our actions. I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
there is, we have all kinds of technology available that can help us bring accountability to our own actions. We can, all the biohackers perhaps can, be on a blockchain that we can create for all this kind of biohacking, neurohacking, or life hacking experiments. And we bring there is no need for any bureaucracy there. We bring our accountability by ourselves.
Yeah,
but at the same time, we know who is working on what experiments. We need to have some kind of database where we know what kind of experiments are happening all across nations.
Yeah. Transparency.
Yes,
Transparency is key. I agree. Transparency is important. That these experiments are not done in secret labs somewhere out there, without oversight of some of the people who might be more intelligent to comment what you're up to. But unfortunately, every single superpower today is conducting all kinds of weird experiments in secret labs for national security reasons. And they have developed a bunch of technologies and interventions that work, but they're keeping them secret for a future opportunity to use them. So it's, in the end, global politics is all about gaining some kind of advantage of another, and that's a very human thing. It happens on an individual level, how people compete at the workplace, or when they're kids on the yard, they're trying to find an edge over others. It's a very human thing, this competition. But on a collective level, it doesn't really elevate our consciousness, because in the end, the biggest risk is that we destroy ourselves with our stupidity. The people who worked on the atomic bomb, who did all those experiments, they definitely didn't see the devastation that was coming. They thought they're working on free energy almost, like they thought they're solving world's energy crisis and problems. They thought it was a noble thing to work on, and it turned into absolute nightmare. So then we implemented, after those mistakes, we implemented cultural structures and some regulatory structures around those things so that we can manage the problem. So in the end, I believe that we, as humans, we probably need to do some mistakes so that we can become wiser, we can understand our own mistakes. Now, on a collective level, taking the complexity of financial markets that is being run by computers, taking the food agricultural system that is run by monocrops and food mass production and destroying of natural resources, looking at just like the looting of natural resources on this planet in general, and pollution, man-made risk factors. To me, we live that time where we have the highest potential. We have the greatest technologies. We have nanotechnology. We have 3D printed organs. We have space travel. We have atomic energy. We have implants. We have artificial intelligence and a bunch of other things that are really cool, that could save humanity of its own stupidity, that can take us to a new level, maybe transcend what it means to be human. At the same time, simultaneously, we have the highest, craziest existential risks to our survival. As a species, as a civilization, we are in an extended time period now. We were supposed to be already gone. If you look at any civilization in the past, the Egyptians, the Mayans, all of them destroyed themselves eventually. They all developed high technology. They created a very complex socio-cultural structure. They were prospering. And then, famines came, some kind of vector trickled down. It might have triggered by a natural disaster or some kind of super bug, but eventually they were gone. And that could happen to us as well. And I believe the only way out is our technological capability. The only way out is to transcend our simplistic human abilities of processing information, understanding complexity. So our scientific method, our ability to use a microscope and a telescope and artificial intelligence are all tools to empower us to go beyond what our own stupidity, in a way, to gain an advantage in situations where we are almost killing ourselves. And that's the situation where we are right now. It's the world is basically a place now where we have atomic weapons in the hands of apes, and a lot of huge structures, let's call those corporations and countries, whose politicians and decision makers are driven by short-term interest. They don't look at, what life is going to look like in 100 years. They think about their next term. They think about their own self-benefit next month. And that kind of like reward mechanism is not supportive for our survival as species in the long term. That's what I'm concerned about if you're looking for any kind of risks.
Yes, no, I hear you on that, and I firmly believe that I am a firm believer of having freedom to choose and being accountable for everything that happens to us individually and collectively. And that includes our health, our sicknesses, the treatment path that we choose, or the survival of our communities, the survival of our nation, or what we choose for the empowerment of the humanity. And I'm all for trying new things. And I believe in collective intelligence. This is a time of open sourcing, and with the help of technology, and as we see the machine intelligence growing so rapidly, I am a firm believer that we do have to increase human intelligence. And one way is that, use collective effort of as many individuals as possible to increase innovation all across nations. I am a firm believer of that. And I think we all have something to contribute for the betterment of humanity, for the survival and sustainability of humanity. So there is no problem that individually and collectively we cannot solve if we all put our, brain power together. And that is the collective intelligence that we need to develop as we go forward. As the machine intelligence is expanding so rapidly, we do need to come together to come up with our collective intelligence to solve bigger problems, and also make sure that machine intelligence do not beat human intelligence, and we do not come to a stage where we make ourselves extinct because we humans could not collaborate and cooperate and come up together for with collective intelligence to beat the rapidly growing machine intelligence. But my concern is that if something doesn't go as planned or hoped for, as so many citizens continue to get excited and continue to try new experiments, some of them are wise enough to look at the risk that could emerge from that. Some may not have that wisdom, and since we do not have a defined structure or a framework or even a system on which we have transparency, we don't know how many biohackers are there across nations. We don't know what kind of experiments they are trying to do. Some may have good intentions, some may not have good intentions. Some may want to destroy some nations, some may want to destroy crops of some nations, or some may want to create pathogens and create some sort of diseases. So there are a lot of different variables that we need to be aware about, and we need to come up with a system that gives us transparency, accountability, and at the same time encourage innovation and encourage collective intelligence. So perhaps we need to think about using blockchain, create a blockchain for biohacking community that doesn't require governance structure, but it has self-embedded, risk managers who look after each other, or just biohackers who give a second opinion about, what kind of experiments are happening. So maybe something like that we need to think about. Again, this is not about bureaucracy, but at the same time, it will give us a collective view of where the biohacking movement is going and what kind of experiments are going on and who is involved and what is their motive. Sometimes we may be able to find out someone with a bad motive using this kind of system. So that is something to think about. But having said that, what would you like to tell our global viewers and listeners, and especially the young minds who are trying to make a difference, who are trying to solve problems, and who are so capable of coming up with some really smart innovations?
Yeah, I mean, You said a lot of wise things over there. Humanity needs to definitely move to the next stage. And the way how I see it is that it's not just that we are somehow different from our computer systems or collective intelligence or risk portfolios, but we are all the same. We are actually our own tools and technologies because we created them and they are now shaping us. So all that programming that we are doing on different machineries that are then part of our life is actually we are programming ourselves because we are part of the systems and tools that we create. And in the end, you refer to blockchain. Now, blockchain implies a movement from centralized control to a decentralized system. Which has some kind of trust mechanisms that humans can't hack. And what we have to understand in this context is that what happens there is that we are actually surrendering some kind of centralized control to machinery. And when that happens, obviously it's a good thing because the human link is always the biggest risk. If there is a middleman, that being some border control agent, or that being some individuals calling the shots, or someone who is key to financial transactions, what you will notice eventually is some kind of corruption. And if we replace that with machines that don't have any kind of personal needs or greed, we might be able to live in a more sustainable society. Now, having said that, it also means that we are thinking of artificial intelligence and computer systems like blockchain, decentralized systems. What we have to understand is that we are now creating an intelligence that is more capable of complex action than we are as humans. So in terms of interpreting complex data and sensory input and doing decisions based on that, if that happens, that we get into narrow artificial intelligence in specific areas or even close to general artificial intelligence, that's when we have to let go of our control as humans. We can't control this technology. Because if you see the microscope, it enabled us to see into the microcosm. The telescope enabled us to see into the macrocosm. Now the artificial intelligence enables us to see into the complexity of reality and how to react to it or respond to it in real time. And that kind of machinery will be more intelligent in doing that as humans. So it means that if we look at our political system or our financial markets or just about any system running it, we should give the control to our machines. And we wouldn't be able, because we are just so simple organisms, we wouldn't be able to understand fully how it makes its decisions. So many people who work on artificial intelligence, they talk right now about it's like working with alien technology. You have an input, then the algorithms do something, there's an output, maybe the self-driving car stays on the road or not. Then you do an optimization, and maybe it improves the situation or makes it worse. There is no way to fully debug and visualize what's going on there because it's so complex and difficult to kind of get to the root here. Now it means that as humans, we are not separate from our tools. We are our tools. And it's as much as we are giving away control, what is happening, we're actually merging with our technology. We're becoming part of it. So we are most likely to be creating more like a post-human that is a combination of our very tools, our very scientific discoveries simultaneously as we are biological organisms. So a hybrid, a combination of both is more likely than machines taking over or destroying us. Because if they destroy us, there is nothing left. Machines and tools don't do much without our presence. Well, you could basically create some kind of self-replicating 3D printing, galactic virus that just spreads from one planet to another, prints itself and sends itself to another planet. but it would be quite boring and would take a long time before it evolves anywhere. Probably it will just get destroyed. So to elevate what it means to be human is to be able to kind of take that insight that what has taken us here is our relationship with our tools. Homo sapiens is someone who is able to use different tools, language including, mathematics, fire. And as we create our tools, we're able to leverage those tools and take ourselves to the next level. Now, this is the process that everyone should be involved with. So if I have some recommendation to anyone is to open up something like Coursera, with some online learning platform, and look at what are the popular courses there. And think about, all the popular courses. Have you studied any one of those? And what we have right there on top 10 is mainly things related to artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms, synthetic biology, whatever. So it's the coming stuff that is not taught in schools. It's not the most interesting stuff for people to learn on these massive online course platforms. So that's super interesting to me. There's a lot of potential to extend our capabilities with technology. I wouldn't be that fearful of it.
Of course not. None of us need to be fearful about the technology. Technology is empowering. It gives us an ability to reach the next level. And, like I was just talking, if we use the blockchain technology to create a decentralized innovation system, to not monitor, but to get an overview of all the biohackers, what they are working on all across nations. Right now, we just have a silo view about movement, a biohackers movement in Finland, biohackers movement in US, in all different parts of the world. We don't have a collective view of where the biohackers are going, what kind of experiments they are doing, what kind of tools and technology they have created, what kind of better way of doing things that they have created. So if we have a decentralized framework like blockchain that gives us a ability to have a collective view, that would give us an amazing response of collective intelligence to some of the biggest problems that we are facing today. And technology is giving us that ability to. So technology is giving us the fundamental transformative ability to do what we want to do, to not only bring us more potential, more power, more empowerment to our human body, but also can give us survival techniques and tools for the coming tomorrow. Because like you said, human race has already overlived, and that we are at a point where this technology warfare that is happening in cyberspace, geospace, and is emerging in space brings us a lot of complex security risks. So we need to come up with a way to make sure that all the people who have similar thought process, similar ideology, similar desire and approach to save the humanity, to do something for the benefit of the humanity, that they have a collective view and that they don't work in silos. So thank you. Having said that, thank you so much, Teemu, for participating in Risk Roundup today. We appreciate your thoughtful insight on biohacking to neurohacking, and our global viewers and listeners would benefit tremendously from the information you provided on the do-it-yourself movement, or the biohacking movement that is growing across nations. And even if a single individual can hack their body without creating interconnected and interdependent risks that would impact others, and manage their independent risk effectively based on the discussion we had today, this Risk Roundup dialogue has been of service, and we thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, just to add, like what you're promoting here is radical transparency, like with blockchain technology, to make it more transparent what other people are working on. And I mean, we would need the same thing for politics. We would need the same thing for corporate decision-making systems, so that we have transparency and we can backtrack, just as we can almost start to backtrack now where our food is coming. We should be able to backtrack where our decisions are coming from. and who's responsible, and so that we can also contribute. It's not only about control. It's not only about observation. It's also the ability to collectively bring more insight into it. So with that, I mean, it requires a fundamental transformation in the way how we think about the world. It doesn't come with without issues. It doesn't come without risks, obviously. That at the same time, a risk is a potential opportunity. So if there is, computer hackers who are hacking into systems, trying to break computer systems, what they're doing in the process, they're making them more resilient, more perfect. Without this activity of breaking into systems, we wouldn't get secure systems. In a similar manner, without some person experimenting on biohacks and killing himself, we wouldn't be able to discover then the things that will work. Obviously, we could be more wiser. We could statistically and through simulation and through just like mathematics and predictive algorithms, we might be able to predict that that might not be a wise decision, or that one might not work. So I think this kind of inquiry is a continuous process in science. It's a very human thing. And we will make mistakes. We should be ready to also forgive those mistakes. But we shouldn't contain technology. We shouldn't see technology on itself as a threat. Because in the end, it's a very human thing. And with all human things, we will see both sides. We will see the potential, the light, the possibility. At the same time, we see the enormous risk that comes with it. So it's a double-edged sword. It depends how we use it and how wise we are in using it and how well informed we are in using it. So this kind of enlightenment that comes from education and peer support and using algorithms that are smarter than us is perhaps able to keep us evolving still to a direction where we are closer to a more complex organism that is really then capable to transcend what it means to be human. So yeah, very, very much thank you for this interview. And if anyone is interested in any of the stuff that I do, you can go to biohackingbook.com, or if you're interested in our event, you can look at biohackersummit.com.
Thank you so much, Teemu. So Risk Roundup, a global initiative launched by Risk Group, is a security risk reporting for risk emerging from existing and emerging technologies, technology convergence and transformation happening from across cyberspace, geospace, and space. We at Risk Group believe that risk management, security, and peace, they walk together hand in hand. Though security is related to management of threats and peace to the management of conflict, risk management is related to management of security vulnerabilities as well as management of conflict. And it is not possible to conceive any one of the three without the existence of the other two. All three concepts feed into each other. We believe that the security we build for ourselves is precarious and uncertain until it is secure for everyone across nations. Tradition becomes our security, so if we build a culture of managing risk effectively, it will lead us to security, and security will lead us to peace. Let's manage the existing and emerging risks together. For more information on the risk roundups, or to watch the risk roundup webcast or hear the risk roundup podcast, please go to riskgroupllc.com and do not forget to subscribe and share. Until next time, I'm Jayashree, host of Risk Roundup, signing off. See you next time. Thank you.